Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist of Queen. Thank you for joining us on our Wednesday night Bible study as we journey verse by verse through the Old Testament here in 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 12 is where we're going to be this evening. Saul has been anointed as king. He's been confirmed by the people. He had to lead the people in a battle, and then the people gather to really affirm what they've already confirmed, what God already anointed in Saul. But then Samuel stands up and gives a speech to the people here in 1 Samuel chapter 12, starting in verse 1. And Samuel said to all Israel, "Behold, I have obeyed your voice in all that you have said to me, and I have made a king over you. And now, behold, the king walks before you, and I am old and gray. And behold, my sons are with you. I have walked before you from my youth until this day. Here I am. Testify against me before the Lord and before his anointed, whose ox I have taken, or whose donkey I have taken, or whom have I defrauded? Whom have I oppressed? Or from whose hand have I taken a bribe to blind my eyes with it? Testify against me, and I will restore it to you." So this section of Scripture, it's often headed in your Bible as Samuel's farewell address. And this really is a bit of a misnomer because Samuel is still around, not just here, but afterwards, and he's still operating in his role as the prophet even after this speech, though his role as the judge would fade and his role as prophet would take precedence. If anything, this is another warning to the people of their foolishness in demanding a human king to lead them rather than the Lord. The first thing that Samuel says here to the people is that he has obeyed the people. And this should have been an immediate red flag to everyone listening that his actions of appointing a human king were in obedience to the will of the people rather than the will of God. And we must always be aware from where our motivations stem, because if we are not careful, we will find ourselves in obedience to sources other than to the Lord. And now Samuel, he's not acting in sin. The people were sinning by rejecting the Lord, but Samuel was acting on the Lord's instruction. And the Lord was going to give the people exactly what they were demanding, which would ultimately demonstrate how much the people really needed the Lord. Samuel points out that he had done exactly as they had wanted and had installed a king over them. And now Samuel, he reminds the people that he has been working publicly before them all for a very long time, since he was only a few years old. There may not have even been anyone left who remembers a time before Samuel. He has even had sons who have grown up during his time as the leader. However, reminding the people of his sons may not have been to his benefit, as some would think, because 1 Samuel 8 verse 3 says that they did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Though he may have simply been mentioning his sons to emphasize that his ministry tenure had spanned decades. Notice that Samuel does not say that his sons are, or even that they have been serving over the people in any kind of leadership role in the near past. He says that his sons are merely among the people. So he's simply referencing them as regular citizens, whereas previously they had been relegated to leadership down in Beersheba in the past. Here Samuel makes no mention of them still being in any kind of positions of leadership. They're simply there among the people. Then Samuel proceeds to seemingly declare his own trustworthy credentials. He is defending his character not to puff himself up before the people or seeking acknowledgement for his goodness. Rather, he is trying to lay the groundwork for the authority that he has to say what he is about to say to the people. He's asking the people to recognize that he is not someone who has false motives or who seeks his own personal agenda. He goes so far as to open himself up to anyone in all the nation of Israel. If anyone has something to say against his personal integrity, he would make restitution for it if it exists at all. He is asking if he as their leader is above reproach, as Paul similarly wrote about Christian church leaders in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2. But then here, what happens next is the people respond to his comments. Verse 4, they said, "You have not defrauded us or oppressed us or taken anything from any man's hand." And he said to them, "The Lord is witness against you, and his anointed is witness this day, that you have not found anything in my hand." And they said, "He is witness." So the people openly expressed what Samuel's seeming rhetorical question had implied, that he was blameless in all things before them. They say that he never cheated anyone or abused his authority out of pride or spite. He would seem to have been always done the right thing in the sight of God, which is difficult for even the best of people. This could not have been said of Abraham, of Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Gideon, Samson, or any of the other leaders of Israel up through this time. Each of them had made some very public lapses in judgment with regards to what was right in the sight of God. And Samuel doesn't just say it himself. It is recognized by everyone, even those who might have had a problem with him over the years, that he has always done the righteous thing. Man, what a question. Could this kind of thing be said about any of us, much less if we were bearing the responsibility for that many people? Because amplified responsibility only serves to amplify what is already in our hearts. Then he says something very interesting. He says that that they have not found anything in his hand. It could be that this is referencing him not taking a bribe, but this could also be going further than that. It could be that he is saying that he has never taken anything from the people at all. Meanwhile, he has relied completely on the Lord to provide for all of his needs. Samuel not only was a man of great integrity, he also demonstrated unwavering faithfulness in front of the people. He showed them what it looked like for a person to completely trust in the Lord for all of his needs and for all of his direction, which is even more of a strike against the people. Not only did they grow jealous of the pagan nations around them, they did so with a living, breathing example of faultless faithfulness walking right in front of them. Here in 1 Samuel 12, Samuel then really emphasizes his point about being faultless by getting the people to swear by the Lord that all of this is true. And the people do swear by the Lord as the witness against them if they were ever to question Samuel's faithfulness. But in Samuel's side of the conversation, there's an interesting point. Samuel says that the Lord's anointed is a witness this day to their testimony to Samuel's faithfulness. That means the newly anointed King Saul is right there among the assembled group. And that is very important because Samuel is about to recount Israel's history and the Lord's repeated deliverance and provision for the people. And yet, even though God delivered the people time and time again, they would still go on to reject him and demand to have a human leader. And so Saul sitting there hearing all this, how do you think Saul responded to hearing Samuel talk in this way? We can probably guess at how he would have responded later in his career as king, but what do you think he was thinking here at the beginning of his kingdom or his rule as king? Look at verse 6. And Samuel said to the people, "The Lord is witness, who appointed Moses and Aaron and brought your fathers up out of the land of Egypt. Now, therefore, stand still, that I may plead with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous deeds of the Lord that he performed for you and your fathers." So here he says again that the Lord is the witness about all that had been done for the people and is the witness about their reactions to what he had done for them. The same God who was with them on that day before Samuel was the same God who appointed Moses and Aaron and delivered the Israelites from Egyptian slavery. He is the same yesterday and today and forever. Hebrews 13:8. Samuel tells the people to stand still and pay attention. They need to stop moving around, stop fidgeting, do not leave the assembly during this moment. He doesn't want anyone to miss what he's about to tell them. He's going to tell them about all of the righteous actions that the Lord has done on their behalf and on behalf of their ancestors. God has been intervening on their behalf since the beginning. He has protected them and provided for them in abundance at every step of the journey. Notice that Samuel wants to plead with the people before the Lord. Now that is very interesting. That's a very interesting way to phrase this type of reminder. God has already had Samuel anoint Saul as king. The people have already confirmed Saul as king. Saul has led the people in battle as their king, and the people then affirmed Saul as king. So there would not be any undoing of what had already been done. So what exactly was Samuel going to plead with the people about before the Lord? Well, it would seem that Samuel is pleading with the people to remember the Lord and not to solely rely on themselves and their king. He's pleading with the people to be faithful to the Lord, even though they had started this new era with the king with rebellion. He's calling on them to do a faith reset and return to the Lord and follow his ways. So let's look here at all of what Samuel reminds the people. Verse 8. When Jacob went into Egypt and the Egyptians oppressed them, then your fathers cried out to the Lord, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your fathers out of Egypt and made them dwell in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God, and he sold them into the hands of Sisera, commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the king of Moab, and they fought against them. Samuel reminds the people of their great and very consistent sin throughout history. The Lord would act greatly on behalf of the people, and the people would then forget the Lord. The Lord had even established the Passover feast specifically so that the people would never forget what he had done for them. And yet the people may have simply turned the Passover feast into a paint-by-numbers traditional activity rather than a genuine time of worship that would dynamically impact how they were to live their lives. In addition, the Lord gave the people laws and rituals that were established to remind them on a daily basis of how dependent they really were on him. And yet, either from frequency or familiarity, the people still forgot the Lord and his involvement in their daily lives. So then, the Lord allowed enemies to oppress them in an effort to turn them back to him. There were times that this oppression would take a number of years or even decades in order to have the desired result of opening the spiritual eyes of the Israelites. Sometimes the further we have wandered away from the Lord, the more time and severity it takes to pull us out of our spiritual stupor. Let's look at verse 10. And they cried out to the Lord and said, "We have sinned because we have forsaken the Lord and have served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. But now deliver us out of the hand of our enemies that we may serve you." And the Lord sent Jerubbaal and Barak and Jephthah and Samuel and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies on every side, and you lived in safety. So having experienced great oppression and subjection and servitude, the Israelites then called out to the Lord from their need. When things were easy and they felt secure, they had abandoned the Lord. But when things were difficult, they turned back to the only source of real power, God. It was almost as though deep down they knew what was right and true, so much so that when hardships arose, they sought out the Lord for intervention. The people proceeded to confess their sins and ask the Lord for help from the enemies who had come against them. Then the Lord sent certain individuals to come and lead the people and deliver them out from under the thumb of their enemies. So you got Jerubbaal. He was that was the name given to Gideon after he and 10 of his servants tore down the altar of Baal and the Asherah in their town of Ophrah in Judges chapter 6. And then you got Barak. Barak worked under Deborah in Judges 4 and 5. And they were the ones who the Lord used to deliver Israel from Sisera that was mentioned earlier here in this chapter, verse 9. Then you got Jephthah. He's from Judges chapters 11 through 12. He was a mighty warrior whose half-brothers had run him off because his mother was a prostitute. The Israelites sought him out for help when the Ammonites attacked, and the Lord used him greatly. However, Jephthah had been greatly influenced by the pagan cultures around him and vowed to sacrifice whatever came out of his house first when he returned home. And tragically, his daughter came out first. And though the Lord had used him, Jephthah then chose to worship the Lord in a manner similar to the pagan cultures with their despicable practices. And then finally here, Samuel mentions himself as a judge of whom the Lord had used to deliver the people. You know, though Samuel's not listed in the book of Judges, Samuel is said to be a judge in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 15. It says, Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. Now let's go back to 1 Samuel chapter 12, verse 12. And when you saw that Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, came against you, you said to me, no, but a king shall reign over us, when the Lord your God was your king. So fear rang out among the Israelites when the Ammonites opposed them again. Now this phrase, this is very interesting here, because in 1 Samuel 8, when the Israelites made the request of a king, neither the people nor the text makes any mention of the Ammonites coming out against them. And so here in 1 Samuel 12, Samuel gives a fuller picture of what was going on around the region. It would seem that something about the Ammonite attack this time brought out this kind of request from the people. But that begs the question, what makes this attack so much more severe than the attacks of the past, that the people would demand a king this time, but not at other times? The truth is that Scripture doesn't tell us what made that attack spark the demand for a king while the other attacks did not. It could be possible that the sight of the other nations being led by a human king was always in front of them. And so with each subsequent attack, the Israelites would see those kings, and the thought may have been festering and growing in curiosity each time. Then the Ammonite attack, this Ammonite attack may have simply been the thing that pushed them over the edge of finally demanding a king. So the decision of wanting a king, it may have not been a sudden one, but rather one that had been building for some time, maybe even generationally. But then Samuel wants to emphasize to the people that they already had a king who was far superior to any human king that they might choose for themselves. Look at verse 13. And now, behold the king whom you have chosen, for whom you have asked. Behold, the Lord has set a king over you. If you will fear the Lord and serve him and obey his voice and not rebel against the commandment of the Lord, and if both you and the king who reigns over you will follow the Lord your God, it will be well. But if you will not obey the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the commandment of the Lord, then the hand of the Lord will be against you and your king. So Samuel points out here that the Lord has delivered them again. This time, the Lord has delivered to them a king as they demanded. He emphasizes that the king was given by the Lord, but having a king was not the Lord's plan. He emphasizes that the idea for the king came from the people, and even the kind of king that they received was exactly what they had chosen. Then Samuel proceeds to point out that even though they have the king, they are still going to have to operate in the same manner as they did before, in subjection to the Lord. They will experience good things, but they will need to fear the Lord and serve him and obey his voice and not rebel against the commandment of the Lord. Then notice that it's not simply the people who are to remember to follow the Lord. The king will also be required to follow the Lord if they all are to experience his blessings. And then if any of them rebel against the word of the Lord, they will discover that they will have the Lord working against them. And if they thought that having pagan nations as enemies was difficult, then they were going to discover how difficult life was going to become when they would make themselves enemies of God. So we must all remember to follow the Lord. And we must all follow the Lord. No matter our role, no matter our title, no matter our age, no matter our experience, we must follow the Lord always. So thank you for joining us here on our Wednesday night study, verse by verse walkthrough of the Old Testament, here 1 Samuel chapter 12. I hope you'll join us again next week as we continue the rest of Samuel's speech and then begin to get into what transpired afterwards. So I'll see you next week.